Welcome to the enigmatic world of Paranormal M, where mysteries abound and skepticism is challenged. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and turn on notifications to dive deep into the unknown with us. Get ready to question everything. The Gray Camaro. True story from about 10 years ago. So there I was in my beat-up Jeep Wrangler, strolling home from my girlfriend's house at about 2 a.m. It's pitch dark on this twisty back road with forest on my left and my Christmas tree farm on my right. The road is pretty narrow, has very little shoulder, but not much bank either, just gravel and grass. I'm going way faster than I should. I come around the next bend and there's a gray Camaro with black racing stripes. Looks like maybe an SS from the 70s, hard to say. Parked completely sideways, blocking nearly the full width of the road, headlights shining into the tree farm. There's this guy in a leather jacket and jeans, slicked back salt and pepper hair, leaned back casually on the side of the car smoking a cigarette. I slam on my brakes and manage to bring it to a slow roll. I'm too trusting of a person, so I think, oh damn, must be having car trouble. I'll roll my window down and pull up to see if he needs help. Before I can even start rolling my window down, this dude tosses his cigarette to the ground and full-on starts walking at me. Not along the side of the road or toward my driving side conversationally, but straight into my headlights. Straight at my still-moving Wrangler. He looks furious. So at this point, I'm like, all right, forget this. He's either angry for how fast I was going or a plainclothes cop or something. So I gun it, yank the wheel over, jumping off into the grass on the side of the road, whip around the tail of his car. I distinctly recalled for some reason the taillights feeling extremely bright as I passed. This angry red just filling my vision and lighting the whole cabin of my Wrangler up. I pull back up on the road and check my rear view, afraid to hit him, or afraid he's after me, or just plain afraid. Nothing, no car, no man, no illumination on the tree farm. Now I do stop, pull over and get out, thinking I must have gone further than I thought and around another curve or something. But no, this is definitely the curve. I'd only made it another 50 feet. I can see my torn up tracks in the grass, both where I got back on the road and where I went off initially. I wish I had the sense to go back and check for that cigarette butt, or anything, any sign of him. But I was way too creeped out at that point. Got back in my Jeep, got out of there. This place was once a cemetery. I've realized that I'm a spiritual sensitive. Whenever my parents would drive by a cemetery or funeral home, I'd get chills. Don't want to be nearby these places. I think it'd be due to most of my dad's side of the family being shamans, and my own personal experience, which I've posted on other subreddits. My college class was doing a volunteer field trip and sort of on the way to this place. It was being converted into an outdoor garden or greenhouse, I'm not sure. But when we first arrived, I got a small chill, but didn't think much of it or didn't want to cause the instructor to be dividing us into groups and were telling us to follow the person who's leading the project. The feeling didn't really become bad until maybe an hour of being there. That's when I started feeling full cold chills running through my entire body. It was like I was standing inside a restaurant freezer. I'll also mention it was a very hot summer day, around 90 degrees, and we were told to drink water. It got to the point where I was starting to feel very lightheaded and getting very dizzy. So I went over to the instructor, told her that I wasn't feeling well. She told me to go and sit in the shade by the canopy that the projector was later setting up, and well, I did just that, and while sitting there, I couldn't shake off the chills until we went to have lunch at the picnic tables across the street from the location. As soon as we stepped off the location, the chills went away and I was back to normal again. Sadly, after we finished lunch, we stayed for another hour and a half, maybe even longer, and to which the chilling feeling came back again. But instead of just chills, it felt like a hand was now gripping the back of my neck like an owner holding their dog, sort of loose fur, to keep him from running off. Again, I told my instructor, and she told me to stay at the canopy because my face was actually becoming pale. She was becoming worried and didn't want me passing out from heat stroke, which once nearly passed out from, and I told her ahead of time. She kept coming back to check on me and was going to volunteer, and well, after a while they finally finished and I joined up with them. While the project leader was thanking us, I remember feeling like somebody was watching me. When I looked around, no one was nearby. I started rubbing my arms to try to make the cold feeling go away, and my instructor probably noticed. Left the place. As we were walking away, my classmate mentioned that this place was once a cemetery, and he didn't know if the bodies were moved or not. Felt mad that he didn't bring this up until now, which I mentioned, and our instructor apologized since she didn't know herself. I can't describe exactly what I saw, but I'll try. Last night I was out back around midnight, with a tree line and a forest in our backyard. Miles of forest way out in the country. It was pitch black, and I mean so dark you couldn't see anything. Creepily quiet, too. The air was completely still, abnormally quiet. Super peaceful moonless night. The dog was with me, just staring at the tree line dead still about 25 yards in front of me. The forest was about 75 yards. I could see him with my flashlight. He wouldn't move, so I went and got my night vision scope out of the car. I was panning around ground level, but didn't really see anything. I aimed the scope up in the trees and caught this thing. First, almost looked like a really big owl. Then it changed its outline and started floating to the left and, well, then to the right, down and then up very slowly and graciously, sort of like a dancer. It was almost like it sensed me looking at it and started moving because of me. It glowed through the scope and looked like a big jellyfish almost, like an ectoplasm blob, maybe 2 feet in diameter. I hit record. The scope takes pictures and videos. But of course, no memory card. I sprinted inside, jammed one in, and ran back outside. The scope started malfunctioning like crazy. Wouldn't go into night vision mode. Wouldn't shut off. Wouldn't respond. Dog was barking now, still in the same area. Tried to turn on my flashlight, but that wouldn't work either. It was nuts. So I ran back inside and literally had to remove the batteries from the scope to turn it off and back on. Worked normally. Ran back outside, and of course, nothing. I panned around until about 2 a.m. looking for that thing again, but it was gone. I stayed out until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Never seen anything like it. It was beautiful and majestic. Floated elegantly high, low left, right, was like a glowing blob. I'm going to obsessively check for it nightly now, and I'll be ready. Did I see ghosts as a kid, or was I just imagining stuff? So when I was little, maybe 7, I woke up from a nightmare. Went down to my parents' room to sleep. They have a big bedroom with a glass porch door and a window next to it. I struggled to fall asleep since I sneaked into the room and there wasn't any bed space left. I was laying by their feet close to the porch door. I knew I was awake when I saw this, I'm sure. I looked out from the porch door and saw a white silhouette holding what looked like an oil lantern. It wasn't that basic black silhouette with the top hat that I think everybody has seen. I have a very creepy story about that too, though. It looked like it was floating and had a hood and a distressed coat. I'll try to draw a little digital sketch of it. After I saw it, I got up from going to the bathroom and I was right across the hall in my parents' bedroom. When I got back, it was completely gone, not standing there creeping through the window anymore. And this memory has haunted me for years. Whenever I've talked about it, it's been like sort of brushed off as me just being a kid, probably having a nightmare. But I'm sure I saw it. I've always heard theories from people that animals and children are more likely to see spiritual activity. This is not the only time I've seen this white shadow either. My old bedroom, which I shared with my brother, I bedroom at the time used to have a balcony that was kind of built into the room. It's really weird to explain, but my parents put the plywood and just took down the fence from it when I was 6 or 7 because they were going to expand the bedroom. There was a big window, and again, a glass door out to the balcony thing. Me and my brother had a bunk bed on the opposite side of the room. I had the top bunk. I usually stayed up reading late after my bedtime. About 10 minutes after I turned my flashlight off, I looked toward the window and I saw it again. A white shadow was standing there, but just as I looked, it hid. I've been freaked out about it basically my entire life. Somebody had a similar experience, or was I just a kid imagining stuff? Ghost Granny. My grandmother died when I was pretty young. I couldn't get her to answer her phone, so I went to her house to check on her, found her body. My sister and I have always been very close to her. When she came in town for the funeral, we decided to spend the night at her grandma's for a few nights, to feel closer to her and be amongst her things. We were sitting in the living room with her cat. I found her cat was curled around her head. She loved that cat. We're talking about her life, and it got a little bit deep, both crying and hoping she was at peace. Suddenly, the cat who was sitting between us jumped up and started hissing at the fireplace. Then the flue to the fireplace slammed shut really loud. Scared the shit out of us. We then heard footsteps above her in the bedroom. That's where she died. It was scary and not comforting for us or the cat. He was also kind of a person who never wanted anybody to feel sorry for her. I think we got too personal about her life and it pissed her off. I had several other uncomfortable moments in her house while cleaning it out. My then 8-year-old nephew and I were packing boxes. Her bedroom door slammed shut. It was a nice day, no windows or doors open. My nephew looked at me and asked, "Why is Granny so sad?" I still get the creeps when telling this story. It was the middle of the night. That's when I woke up to this light tapping at the window across from my bed. The room was decently big, with the bed pushed against the wall in the center of the room. 2 smaller closets to the left on either end of the wall. The window was next to the closet on the far left corner of the room from the bed, with the TV beside it. Before I went to bed that night, I had turned on a light rain sound on the TV, so it was playing sort of queasily in the background. That was while I sat up in bed, tired and weary. The knocking turned into loud thumps that made my heart race and my palms sweaty, and by the sound of it, I could have sworn someone or something was standing outside the window, pounding on it, which wasn't unreasonable considering the room was on the first floor near the entrance of the building. But looking at the alarm clock on my bedside nightstand, I realized it was very unreasonable. It was 3:15, which of course it was. Why wouldn't I wake up at witching hour with the tapping on the window and this utter dread filling my stomach? I don't understand how I missed it, because she was standing there right next to it, beside the window, or rather, a little in front of it, was a girl with long, dripping, wet black hair cascading down her face and body, basically hiding all of her from how long it was. She was wearing this worn-out white dress that ended on the floor. I couldn't see any limbs at all. She reminded me of that girl from The Ring, just less TV-like and real. And for a good 10 seconds, I kind of just stared at her, waiting and watching, praying that this was some sick nightmare that I was about to wake up from. Panic hadn't yet set in. And that's when I realized she wasn't moving or doing anything. I slid underneath the covers, sort of fighting back the tears of fear. I was 14 then. Not young, but not old either, so the fear was pretty reasonable. After taking a few deep breaths and encouraging myself to look again, she was gone. She just vanished. The tapping on the window hadn't ceased. If anything, it got a bit louder. It also started raining after a few minutes of me just sitting there, staring at the spot where the girl once stood. Who came up the stairs? This is something my sister experienced several years ago. It's stuck in my mind ever since. My family have lived in the same house since I was born. I'm 22. We know every single noise in the house. We know who's coming up or down the stairs at any given time without looking. My sister is 6 years older than me. My sister's room is at the top of the stairs, directly in front of the staircase. She always used to leave her bedroom door slightly ajar at night so that my dad could say goodnight through the crack in the door. My dad has always been the last person to go upstairs to bed at night. And just like any other night, me, my sister, and my mother were all in bed. My dad was downstairs. Then my sister heard all of the light switches being flicked downstairs, so she knew my dad was going to bed. She heard his footsteps coming up the stairs, stopped at her door. She said she always did. "Night, Dad." No answer. "Good night, Dad," she said again. No answer. Then my dad came up the stairs. She stands by this story to this day. The first set of footsteps didn't pass a room and go into another room. They sounded exactly like my dad's footsteps. And my dad confirmed that everybody else had gone upstairs at least half an hour before him. It was definitely none of us that had gone up just before him. We'll never have an answer to this, but it does still give me chills whenever my dad comes upstairs at night. Weird encounter in my old historical house. I live in a historical house in a small town. My family and I were getting ready to go somewhere for the day on a Saturday. We all got in the car. Forgot my earbuds inside. Ran back into the house to get them. The earbuds in my room, so I had to walk through the kitchen, dining room, and foyer to get to the stairs to go up to my room. As I was going to my room, my mind was wandering. So when I got to my room, I'd forgotten where I'd put my headphones. So I looked around for a minute. Then I stood in front of my bed, my back to my bedroom door in the hallway, trying to figure out where I'd put my earbuds. Then all of a sudden I hear somebody whispering. It was just loud enough where I could hear it, but not loud enough to where I could make it out. It sounded like it was simultaneously coming from my grandpa's bedroom, the foyer, and even our blue room, which is just off the foyer. There was anybody entered the house. You can hear all the external doors open and close when it's quiet in the house. No one came in. No siblings were trying to mess with me. I'm an only child. My grandpa passed away a couple of years before this. He didn't pass away in his bedroom. He passed away in the blue room because that's where he had his hospital bed set up. And also, for clarification, my maternal grandparents moved in with us when my grandpa's health started to decline a few years ago. My grandma still lives with us. Anyways, back to my story. As soon as I heard the whispering, I hightailed it out of my room, down the stairs, through those couple rooms, and out the door. I don't really believe it was my grandpa. He knew how scared I was as a kid of scary things, and he would have never freaked me out, even as a ghost. Haven't had any weird experiences in the house. My experience while in the Marine Corps. So this takes place back in 2005. This is while serving at the U.S. Embassy in Ivory Coast, West Africa. One morning after working my night shift at the embassy, I returned home to the Marine house. The U.S. Marines lived in a local residence bought and paid for by the U.S. Embassy. It was a 3-story home in what locals would consider an upscale neighborhood, by Ivorian standards. The home was fairly large and had a pool, a gym, a laundry room, and a driver's room on the first floor. It housed 5 U.S. Marines that were tasked with protecting the U.S. Embassy and its personnel. On this morning, I was pretty tired. I just arrived in country and I was still getting used to the night shift. Lots of Red Bulls. I walked up to my room that was on the 3rd story of the house. It was a relatively medium-sized room with a bathroom attached and one large window in the bedroom that was fitted with heavy curtains to keep the daylight out during the day so we could sleep. I was crashing hard from all the Red Bulls. I managed to take my uniform off and get straight into bed. It wasn't long before I reached that state of mind where you're half asleep and half awake. And I do believe it was at this point where I started dreaming, where a sort of sixth sense told me, you have to wake up. I remember opening my eyes, staring at the opposite wall at the foot of my bed. The room was dark and I was still half asleep as I scanned from left side to the room to the right. I recall my eyes concentrating on the daylight that was shooting down the side of the wall toward the corner of my room. As my eyes reached the light, or rather the right far corner, I stopped and focused on a dark spot in the corner of the room. I couldn't make out what it was, but the light abruptly stopped before hitting the corner of the room. As I stared at this dark spot, I realized it was a silhouette of a person. It was tall, and I could make out the outline of shoulders and head. My first instinct was that I was dreaming. But after a few seconds, my vision cleared up, and the silhouette was still standing there. As I focused harder on it, I realized it wasn't disappearing, and the realization that something was standing there hit me. I had a quick flash thought of, what the fuck is that? That's when all of a sudden this shadow figure with red eyes that I can see clearly had now rushed forward and started choking me. Still to this day, I remember the grip it had and the flash of heat I felt run down the back of my neck all the way down to my feet. I closed my eyes tightly. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. The level of fear that struck me was immense. After about 10 seconds, I felt this grip letting go. And as soon as I could move, my first reaction was to reach for my K-bar knife. I kept that on the top of my nightstand. I quickly stood up ready to stab whatever the fuck was in my room. The next couple of seconds was just me tearing my curtains open and clearing the room and restrooms and repeating, what the fuck, Jesus Christ, what the fuck? My room was completely empty. I went from attack mode to quickly trying to convince myself it was just a side effect of this medication I was on. One of the cons of working in an African post was that we were ordered to take mefloquine, an anti-malaria medication, by our command. One of the side effects clearly stated was the possibility of night terrors. But regardless, I couldn't stay in that room. I ended up falling asleep in the common area with the TV turned on. Fast forward 5 months, and we, the Marines, moved out of that home and moved into a new embassy compound. Apparently, it had just been constructed. Me and another Marine decided to have a movie night and watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Creepy movie. When it was done, I walked into the kitchen, ran into Sammy, our butler. Sammy was in charge of doing our laundry and prepping our meals throughout the week. It was amazing. When he wasn't working for us, he spent his time at a Catholic priest at a local Catholic church. He was having the movie fresh in my mind, and I asked him, Sammy, if we got possessed by the devil, could you perform an exorcism? Of course, sir, I do them quite often. Many bad spirits here at Côte de l'Ivoire. Seriously, Sammy? Yes, sir, many evils here. When we moved in, did you bless our new house? Yes, of course, sir. This is a very good home. Not like the old house. That was a very bad house. Instantly I went cold and asked him to explain. The old house was possessed by 3 demonic spirits. He then goes on to tell me that one morning while I was doing our laundry in the basement, he looked into the Marine gym and saw 3 shadow figures with red eyes standing side by side in the corner of the room. He grabbed his crucifix and began to pray before they vanished. He then instructed me to go speak with Joey and one of the Ivorian Marine drivers. I hauled ass to find Joey. Joey was a 49-year-old father of 8. He had worked for 15 years as the embassy Marine driver. Joey tells me one night after dropping off one of the Marines, he returned to the driver's room. That's where he tried to get some sleep. He was woke up by something whispering his name. When he opened his eyes, something grabbed him and started choking him. He said he swung his arms wildly, couldn't hit the thing that was choking him. When it finally released him, he ran out of the driver's room, hopped into the armored suburban Marine vehicle, and drove us to the U.S. Embassy, where he remained the rest of the night. He never again stepped foot in the driver's room. He told me that sometime later our gardener accidentally dug up a juju box that had bones and voodoo witchcraft trinkets inside. Apparently, somebody had cursed the property, according to him. As if the story couldn't get weirder, I headed inside the U.S. Embassy later that day to speak with my GY Sergeant, or GYSGT, about some work. The conversation turned to what I just learned about our old house. Gunny had this look on his face. He reached up to his logbooks and pulled out an incident report. It was from a few years prior and pulled out a report where a former Marine at the post had reported an intruder in his room that had choked him and apparently disappeared. He slept in that room I slept in. The Marine was convinced it happened to the point an official U.S. Embassy report had to be filed. A sergeant named Gunny. I want answers. We have a doll and don't know what to do. The entity Elizabeth the doll, John Doe the ghost. We brought Elizabeth the doll to our apartment, began to have the doorbell ringing on its own. We answered the door to have no one there. And one day with my dad and I moving in, we broke the doorbell only to have a knock at the door. When we answered, no one was there. We quit answering only to single knocks. It was a pattern that we noticed with the knocks that eventually ended. More recently, pens have started moving on their own, ended up in different locations where they were placed. It's fond of a purple pen that we have and moves it on its own accord. John's thrown a pen at my girlfriend's butt. I wonder if the two ghosts can be in one doll. Right now, we've picked up a foreign-sounding girl, Russian or Japanese voice. That's wildly different. And a man's voice on my girlfriend's device. One is a woman trying to find out, oh, it works. She makes the strangest request, like Alexa, fan on. And the man's voice said, they can't hear me. My girlfriend and I have somewhat learned that we can punish them by putting the doll in the closet. Doesn't like it. It will door knock on the closet if we leave it in the long stuff is weird. Excuse me. My girlfriend wants to get rid of it. I really like the doll because it's beautiful. We've been talking about it and I told her, what if it doesn't end the activity and we get rid of a nice doll? It would be a shame. It's done nothing any harm. Confusing. It wasn't the moon. On Halloween of 2007, my boyfriend at the time had just dropped my little brother off at a Halloween party. I can't remember where we were driving to, but we were arguing because we had to take my brother when he picked me up. As we argued, I looked out the passenger window. I noticed the full moon. I remember thinking how cool it was to have a full moon on Halloween when I turned to look at my boyfriend in the driver's seat. While he was yelling, I noticed the crescent moon out of his window. I hurried and looked out my window to look for the full moon, but it was gone. I went to tell him this when the front of our vehicle was illuminated. We rolled to a stop and both looked up from the windshield. It looked like the moon, maybe the width of the vehicle. Bright, but as if it was polished silver. I couldn't tell a definite shape and it was right above us. Close enough that if I climbed into the roof of the car, I might be able to reach it at the lowest. I'm not sure how long it was there, but it slowly moved off to the tree line in the distance. We'd end up climbing onto the car roof and watched it till we couldn't see it anymore. And the strangest part, as if seeing that wasn't, was that there was no other vehicles. We were in the middle of the main road in our small town. It was maybe 7 p.m. on Halloween night. It wasn't until we could barely see it as a dot in the sky that cars started driving past us. In March of 2009, I saw it again with the same boyfriend, and again we were alone. This time it was roughly 3 in the morning. I only know this because I could hear the 3 o'clock train go by. We're in our tiny studio apartment in the woods behind a doctor's office. I noticed it first again. It looked like a bright star at first. Then I saw it come straight down through the trees. Thought it might be a helicopter, but there was no noise. Then it was close enough to see it was just a ball of light, something polished so much that it shined. As it came closer, it was blinding. We both turned our heads and shielded our eyes. I could see our shadows move against the wall inside as if it went through the window into the house. Then it was gone. Well, he ran outside instantly. I hid underneath the blanket screaming. He was crazy. The next morning, the stream that ran by our apartment stopped perpendicular to the beginning of the home, started again directly after it. I couldn't see where it was going into the ground or out of, but it wasn't like that the day before. I had a strange dream of this exact thing happening, down to the sound of the train. To me, it reminded me of the scene when the blue fairy came down in Pinocchio. The only difference was that it was a different house in my dreams. We moved out of the apartment exactly 3 weeks later. As we were moving into our home, the deja vu hit so hard I was nauseous. This was the house in my dreams. Does anybody know what creature this might be? I live in New England. The area isn't super densely populated, and it's somewhat of a rural area, but not in a western way. In the east, rural areas will often have houses, farm fields, fire towers, highways, even more in remote areas. Things are a lot more densely populated outside of the cities here in the hills than the elevations of the northeast. Mountains are still quite sparse, much more akin to the western U.S. There's a local town forest with a large network of trails. Many of them are heavily trafficked by people mountain biking, walking dogs, etc. I like to stroll alone near sunset, especially this time of year when the weather's fairly hot during the day. I would usually stroll with my siblings, but they've gradually drifted away over the years as I started getting college internships, jobs, and moving away, etc. I still enjoy a good walk in the woods, though. So yesterday I set out with my keys and phoned to the woods. It had been a few weeks since I'd last gone on the trail, and because I was busy finishing up some work related to school. This town forest isn't a place I'm pretty familiar with, and although I know all the major trails by heart, and a few of the smaller trails. I usually walk a loop around the park, which goes by a few houses and some livestock and dogs, but about 85% of it is through the woods. The time this happened was about 8:30, just as the sun was setting and it was starting to get dark. I was enjoying the medley of sounds, including leaves rustled by the wind and the repeated bird calls. It was quite soothing, and my thoughts were consumed by something or other such as thoughts of my elderly guinea pig's illness. The point is, I wasn't focused at all on the paranormal or cryptids or anything. I'm a fairly logical person, and although I don't discount the possibility of paranormal beings existing, I think there's a general lack of evidence, and also don't encounter much paranormal activity. I also think that maybe other explanations exist for the paranormal aside from, ooh, ghost. And perhaps it could be other unknown phenomena. I think the only paranormal activity I remember encountering is this breathing sound I heard next to me once or twice after my brother left my room. And then again, I was pretty young, so it's possible it's just my computer fan. Anyways, I digress. So, there I was in the forest, listening passively to the chorus of sounds that echoed through the forest when I was going to get the right trail to do the loop. And like I said, I know this loop path quite well, the whole forest to a certain degree, but there are blind spots in knowledge for some paths I take very infrequently. I was kind of spacing out and I turned on the wrong trail. This trail is a more narrow and wooded trail, which might be a little dangerous in the evening because of the roots. But I thought to myself, oh well, I'm a little familiar with it, but it's probably been a year or two since I last took the trail. The trail gradually narrows to where just about one person can fit on it. I'm a tall guy, so I have to bend over a bit. This trail is maybe about 1.5 miles in length and takes maybe 30 minutes to do at my walking pace. It's about 10 minutes down the trail where I encounter something somewhat strange. Anybody who frequently walks in the woods of New England in summer knows there are oodles and oodles of gray squirrels. I had seen dozens of them along the way. I encountered one, though, that was a bit strange. It seemed unfazed by my presence with a certain confidence that was unbefitting of a prey animal. It somewhat reminded me of my guinea pig in its unfazed and uncaring aura. I whistled at it as I often do because I like to whistle. It still didn't move. I approached the animal and it still seemed unfazed and even somewhat curious. This was very strange. Then I came to my senses and realized that this wasn't a great sign. The squirrel could be rabid or have some squirrel version of chronic wasting disease. I decided that I should get away from the squirrel and continue down the path for about another 7 minutes. There is some data along here, so I was Googling the random questions that came to my mind, like, is there prion disease in squirrels? I was also keeping track of the time because I had a doctor's appointment the next day and I had to go to bed a bit early. When I was about 15 minutes from the end of the trail, that's when the exceptionally weird things began to happen. I don't know if the squirrel incident is in any way connected, but it's strange the two happened in the same evening. So there I was looking to the darkening woods. It was about 8:50 and I think at this point the sun was almost totally down. I had a maybe 20-minute part left to my loop before I left the forest. And that's about when I heard a rustling. I felt no dread because rustlings like these are really quite common. It's usually a squirrel just shifting behind a tree to avoid your gaze, but this sounded different, a bit larger. I felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4" and 210. So I continued on further, but I felt a little more concerned by the fact that the sound was following me. Turned on my phone's flashlight. I caught a glimpse of something shiny like metal, and then something that looked like frog skin. I don't know, but that's when I started to get very scared. Thought it was just a frog on some scrap metal that was hard to see because it was so dark, which the thick tree canopy in this part of the trail wasn't helping with. I started to walk faster with some fear, but certainly I get a little afraid sometimes on my walks. What was really unusual at this point was the fact that this thing was still following me after 4 minutes straight of walking. With my accelerated pace, I estimated there'd be about 10 minutes left to my stroll, and about 5 minutes left on this secluded trail. Just as I reckoned that I was faced with something even more strange, so far my strategy had been to ignore the creature and not think about it as you would with wild animals, especially with reports of black bears in the area. I just wanted to get out of its territory of this thing as fast as possible without angering it or engaging it in any predatory instincts, especially because I couldn't see it. That proved to be somewhat useless when I heard the thing begin to sprint from behind as though it was trying to get in front of me. I sped up to a jog and began to yell at the thing and shine my flashlight behind me. I was trying to catch a glimpse of this thing and identify my enemy. Still not being scared to death, but rather a little shaken, thinking I was being chased off by a coyote or something. Maybe I was neglecting my earlier sight of this creature as sort of a misidentification. At this point, clouds had completely covered the moon, making the trail quite dark. It was because of that and the fact that I was looking behind me that I tripped. The end of the trail was almost in sight, as visible as these things can be in the dark. That's when suddenly I saw a non-humanoid blob in a tree line looking at me with what felt like contempt or hunger. I couldn't tell if I was just imagining it. When I scrambled to find something or anything to defend, I just found my phone and a rock. This thing was in front of me, and I was trying to buy some time to get past it by cutting around the trail into the bush briefly before getting out into the clearing, after which I could get to the well-lit area where my car was. I shined the flashlight of the creature while formulating the plan. I was shocked by what I saw. Previously, I was thinking that this thing was just a black bear, which I was misidentifying in the dark light of the forest. But it became clear that my previous identification was correct. This thing was slimy like a frog, about 5 feet tall, the same size of a chimp. Its eyes appeared like those of a fly, and it twitched away from the light as I shone it in its eyes. I used it as an opportunity to throw a rock at it, which connected, causing the thing to run off into the swamp bordering the trail, at which point I noticed that it had long and thick tail, which it was balanced and was moving like a snake. At that point, I was pretty shocked and most focused on just running, so I got up and bolted for the exit of the trail and quickly bolted home. I haven't told anybody of this experience because I feel or think I'll crazy, but I was even apprehensive to post this on my main Reddit account. I just want more people to take my experience seriously and help me figure out what the heck this thing was. The closest thing I could find in this article is the Silver Lake monsters and giant snakes. Could I have misidentified this creature? It was kind of a blur, but the one thing I remember clearly are the eyes of that creature, the slimy skin and the cobra-like movement. I just honestly have no idea what this could have been, and the only semi-scientific explanation I can think of is some escaped government experiment or alien. It's also possible that I was hallucinating for absolutely no reason, but I've never drank or taken drugs before, and I don't have any history of brain injuries or mental illness or hallucinations. In any unknown animal situation, you have to channel your Steve Irwin. That is my advice. What that will lead you to, I do not know. Is it good advice? I do not know. Yet, it is my advice, nonetheless. The thing on the highway. Joint illusion or something else. I had an experience with my mom. Lately, it's been on my mind, despite it being like 18 years ago. My parents split when I was 4 months old, leading to 18 years of seeing my dad every second weekend and for a week on school holidays. Because my dad's sort of, an ass, my poor mom would have to drive me 2.5 hours from our home in Sydney, Australia to my dad's house in Goulburn, Australia. This trip had been made for 13 years prior to our experience, with us seeing nothing out of the ordinary, and it was made for 5 years after, without us experiencing it again. The large part of our trip took us along the Hume Highway, and that's where the experience happened. It's probably around 8 p.m. The highway was super quiet, almost no other cars on the road. I was chatting to my mom just to keep her awake as per usual, and at one point we got up and down a series of small hills. It's coming over one of these hills that we both noticed what we can only describe as a black mass in the middle of the road. I see it and I say nothing, assuming I'm seeing things because I'm tired. As we get closer to it, Mom starts slowing down, so I guess she could see it too, but still I say nothing. Mom indicates going to change lanes. She's halfway through changing lanes when she slams on the brakes. All I see is a roughly 7-foot-tall white cloud of mist or something that rushed by my mom's side of the car and off to the pitch-black ditch on the other side of the road. My mom immediately starts yelling, freaking out, asking if I saw that. I looked at her and asked, "What, the white mist? Yeah, I saw that." She swears to this day that, she was the mist, or that she was the mist coming from off the side of the road on the side of the car. It's a bold statement. I only saw it leave her side of the car, and she also pointed out that she was changing lanes to avoid the thing in the middle of the road, which, when she pointed at it, was completely gone. We've spoken many times about what happened, but neither of us had experienced anything on that road since. Slightly bothers me that I don't have an answer. I'd like to think it was because we were both tired, but at the same time, it's not like Mom said, "Did you see the white thing?" and my imagination took it from, being a thoroughly freaked out 12 or 13-year-old at the time. She literally said, "Did you see that?" which makes me think we both saw something. That is logical thinking indeed. Her being the thing that she saw, less so. Saw a ghost, and I'm not sure what it meant. So about a week before this occurrence, my 6-year-old niece was spending the night and said that she saw someone behind my mom in the middle of the night. She said it was an old lady with a bun. Later in the week, my mom was somewhat startled awake by something. She said it felt as if the water was poured on her, sort of gasping awake. She wasn't sure what, but when she looked over, she saw a very old woman with lots of wrinkles and a bun smiling kindly at her. According to my mom, she was wearing medieval, almost peasant-like clothing and had a shawl. There was a gold aura around her with rippling behind her as if she was standing in front of some sort of portal. Although there was no malice or negativity coming from the woman, my mom was a little shocked, so she pretended to be asleep. She said that she saw a very old woman with lots of wrinkles and a bun smiling kindly at her. According to my mom, she was wearing medieval, almost peasant-like clothing and had a shawl. There was a gold aura around her with rippling behind her as if she was standing in front of some sort of portal. Although there was no malice or negativity coming from the woman, my mom was a little shocked, so she pretended to be asleep. She waited for some time, and when she looked back, the woman was gone. What could this have been? My mom said she was able to move, and we don't think it was sleep paralysis. Could it have been an ancestor visiting? Anything is possible. Predicting things. I feel like there's a little voice in the back of my head. Whenever I might be doing anything, I'll get a random thought about something that could happen. And it does happen. Like one time I was getting off the bus and thought, what if my crush was here already? And he's usually late. When I got to my spot, I looked up to see him standing a few feet away from me. It's not just simple things like this. It'll be more serious things. One time my sister was driving us home, and I thought, imagine we get into a crash. Yeah, I know I'm not that positive, but anyways, a car from behind hit our car in the side and the door was sitting in. Luckily, not too much damage, but terrifying nonetheless. I don't know why, but sometimes I feel like this force or whatever it is always with me. I always feel like I'm being watched, or more like I'm never alone. Strangely enough, my mom had 2 miscarriages before having me. And me, myself, I don't believe in ghosts. But is there some demon or creature or any way to explain this? I'm Muslim, so I don't believe that I am in some way superior than other human. Okay? I think there's some force trying to help me or something, or maybe harm me. And other than that, I've always felt at peace with the moon. Not in a normal way, but I feel like the moon is calling to me. I'm not drunk either. I know I sound like some kind of psycho, but I feel very spiritual. I've heard of people who are born very spiritual and have abilities like this. Very at peace with the moon, like it's a second home. What do you think it is that I might be dealing with? Well, according to other things I've read, in your religion it would be referred to as a jinn. And yes, I would like a vacation home on the moon myself. For my own reasons. Need guidance on what to do or what to make of this. To start off, I live with my parents out of town. We're farmers. My dad's a no-nonsense guy. Never lied to me once. Our dad last night, and 10 minutes before I'm currently writing this, he saw dancing lights in the dining room this evening. The same lights in the master bedroom. He followed them to the master bathroom, and as he said, they were dancing around the room like little flashlights. Nothing that's blinding, so I followed them to the bathroom and they disappeared. To make note, my father has Parkinson's disease, and it's said that someone with Parkinson's disease can start to hallucinate. However, for the past month, but mainly recently, we've seen a surge in weird stuff that's been happening. 2 weeks ago I was in my room. I heard literal pounding on the wall, at least 6 to 7 consecutive bangs, but not fast enough or not really slow either. They sounded like they came from in the hallway, and they were loud enough to where I could hear them through my headphones while gaming. I got up, opened up my door, and didn't see anybody. I was thinking my dad to be in the hallway. I walk out to the den where my mom and dad are both watching TV. They asked me if I was just outside banging on the window. I said no, but I heard the same thing, but in the hallway. Fast forward to Tuesday night, getting ready to take a shower, and that's where my shower is located. I can see down the hallway to the living room where we have a big-ass glass window that looks into our driveway. Could have sworn I saw a black shadow figure standing outside, but the second I looked back, it was gone. So I take my shower, presumably where the shower is located. I get out, go watch TV, go to bed with a headache. It came out of nowhere. I said, I'll just sleep it off, and I went to sleep. I had a dream that I was getting repeatedly struck by lightning. I couldn't get away. I felt in control, but also helpless at the same time. In the dream, I look in the mirror and my eyes are bloodshot. I have blood coming out of my left ear and snot and blood coming out of my nose. When I woke up, I had a pounding headache. I've never had a migraine, but I would assume that's what it feels like. I felt my left ear and it hurt, and there was some slight residue in my ear like water. My nose was dripping. but I wasn't sweating. I got up to go take some Advil and drink some water and go back to sleep for a bit. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes were bloodshot. Then I went back to sleep. I didn't have the dream again and woke up just fine. Now, these are not my first paranormal experiences. My mom heavily believes in folklore, some sort of a religious, spiritual person. But I'm an up-and-down Orthodox Christian. My dad's Christian, but doesn't believe in ghosts or any of that stuff, but he said he's had weird experiences. My mother started experiencing things. Went around, blessed the house with what I had, and the activity stopped one night. I called and asked my priest to come bless the house, which he just left from doing. And boy, did that night become my priest. Boy, did the night before my priest come get wild. That doesn't sound good. The night before my priest came, my mom had some hip and back issues. We usually sleep in a separate bedroom for my father on a special bed. She said that she was shaken awake by somebody with hands that felt like fire on her skin. She said when she was woken up she said while she was awake, she thought she'd go and get some water. When she went into the kitchen to get some water, she heard the dryer turn on. She freaked her out, in which she came and got me, and I turned it off. However, with this activity, there was no spiritual pressure like there was the night prior when I did prayers amongst the house. But today, when the priest came, when he walked into the house, I could tell in his face that he could feel something was here, but he didn't want to say anything. He did a full blessing around the house, and me and him could both feel that we cornered whatever it was in the master bedroom. Said an exorcism prayer. You can feel in an immediate sense of relief in the room and in the house. Since now, after he's left, the house feels lighter and there's no sensation of being watched or touched anymore. But only time will tell, and I'll have to see what the night brings. So basically, what do you guys think this is? And should I be worried? I'm already thinking about calling my priest to bless the house, but in the meantime, I have incense and holy water and holy oil. Goblin sighting when I was a child. I know this might sound crazy, but when I was around 2 or 3 years old, this is like 2006 or 7, my mom and I just came home from my grandma's house after she got off work. We arrived home at like 6:30 or 7. I know some say that you can't remember anything from a young age, and that my mom might just be influencing me to remember this, but I actually remember this very vividly. I saw another similar story posted on here, and it literally gave my mom and I goosebumps. It's because of how similar it was. So, here it goes. I walked into her house and I went to go play in my room. That was when my mom started to cook dinner. Remember, I was just playing in my room, and I step out of my room to start wandering around. When I looked into my father's gaming room, weird I know, but then I saw this goblin-like creature who looked like the Green Goblin from the Spider-Man comic books. He was wearing a pointy purple hat, pointy purple shoes, with pointy ears and a grin with sharp teeth. He stood about 6 or 7 feet, and when I saw him, I ran to my mom in the kitchen and started tugging on her to come with me, and she immediately followed after me. She saw him as well, but he moved into her hallway. He looked very confused or concerned, like he didn't know where he was and where he was at, and he looked at both of us and looked surprised. He looked very inhuman, but he didn't instill fear in us. Instead, it was more of a calming presence. Then after he saw us, he ran back toward the gaming room and just disappeared. My mom went back to go check to see where it went, but he was nowhere to be found. Mind you, there were only 2 windows, and they were blocked off by a desk, and the windows were closed while we were gone. Many have told me that this was just my dad playing a prank on us, but he was never around and isn't nearly as tall as the goblin we saw. Still talk about it to this day. I'm telling the exact same story each time, and still can't get that creepy image out of my head. I just wanted to come on here and get an explanation on this, or to see if anything similar has happened to anyone else. Mind you, we live in California, in the Bay Area. Please let me know if you've had a similar experience. I want to know. I've attached an image very similar to what I saw. entity in my home that favors the room that I do, and only my guests have seen her. A little background story. My husband and I live in a cute Cape-style home built in 1970. It's in a quiet, heavily forested area. We purchased our home 2 years ago and the market was crazy. So I moved in on my own with our 2 Australian shepherds. That was as my husband was working abroad at the time of the closing. It took nearly a month to get our stuff delivered. Like I said, it was a crazy year for real estate. During that time, I often felt uneasy and felt strongly that I was being watched. It chalked up to being in a new home in a new area without furniture and a big open space. Despite this, I was comforted by the fact that my dogs seemed comfortable here, because they flip out anytime somebody new comes or if there's any little disturbance. They're particularly protective of me when my husband's on one of his trips. Since settling in here, I immediately was drawn to a little room off from the kitchen. Got a lot of light, high ceiling with wooden beams, and a skylight that makes it just a peaceful, bright place during the day. The previous owners used it as sort of a dining nook, but I loved it so much I made it a sitting area, filled it with old books and random shit my dad gets me. I get lots of compliments in this area. It also has a sliding glass door that opens up to a deck that overlooks the backyard. Fast forward to this last weekend where we had a party with some friends. We're all out in the backyard around a bonfire talking and drinking. Then one of my friends, who's particularly sensitive, suddenly blurts out, "Your house is haunted as fuck." Proceeds to tell me that she just saw a dark figure of a long-haired woman moving about the deck when she was watching us. At first, my friend thought it was just a guest at the party, but then realized that, well, we're all out by the fire. My other friend, who stayed with us on numerous weekends since we moved in, responds with, "Okay, you've seen her too." He tells us that he saw it one night when waking up to get some water from the kitchen. He saw this dark figure of a woman standing in a little sitting area I love, walking toward the glass door that leads to the deck. At that time, he was like, "Nope, not entertaining this." Ignored it and went back to bed. I was shocked. I haven't seen anything or felt anything, other than the watched feeling when I initially moved in. And that's when I told them. But since then, remembered how crazy it's been replacing light bulbs and all the light fixtures, especially on that first floor since we moved in. Some of them have burnt out 2 or 3 times within 2 years. My husband is a complete skeptic and rolls his eyes on all this, but just been processing it all myself. It's just ironic and a little unsettling that there's an entity inhabiting the very area of the home that I also love so much and spend so much time in when I'm home. And my dogs have never acted like there's anything there. And they're so sensitive to things being off. He requires things to be on. Ask Reddit. I lived in a part of Texas with dense forest. My friend and I were in the middle school, enjoying exploring at night. We learned that the drainage pipe on the side of the road was big enough for us to crouch through, so we hopped in and started walking, leaving Marcus to guide our way back. After 30 minutes to an hour of walking, we popped out of a manhole that landed us in the middle of nowhere, deep into the woods. We kept walking until we came across an abandoned 2-story cabin. No road leading up to it, no means of accessing the cabin by vehicle. What could be argued as the front lawn was littered with half-buried toys. All of them looked very old in design. Plenty of porcelain dolls were buried in the yard. The windows were too dirty to see inside, so we broke a window with a rock to get inside. What could have been furniture at one point in time had rotted away so that only iron frames remained, and the floor of the cabin was completely covered in empty, oil cans. The kind you see in 50s cartoons. We couldn't go upstairs because the staircase had collapsed from rot, so we left and started making our way back to the manhole we came in from. As we were walking away, I took a look back at the cabin. In the window of one of the second-story rooms, I swear to God I saw a child staring back at me. It looked to be about 8 or 10 years old, short, straight black hair. I'm convinced that I saw a ghost that day, and I'm convinced I'm gonna go to sleep. See ya.